Because I know a big part of my wounded masculine was being okay to ask for help, right? Being okay to receive a feminine touch or receive a masculine feminine touch, right? To really allow myself to be held, not just by myself, right? Because that's a big thing in itself, but also allowing myself to be received and to be held and to someone to create a safe container of safety, support, and security by an external person. Everything is self-love, right? I think we often get caught in, oh, I don't have time for self-love because I have all these responsibilities. I have a family, I have a business, I have friends. But within that, we miss the deeper sort of spiritual understanding that even when we do make the time for our family, for our friends, for our business, that is still self-love, because what we love in another person is either something that exists inside of us already, or it's something that we want to be healed, we want to be integrated, or it's a shadow that we've yet to acknowledge. Welcome, beautiful beings, to season 2 of the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast with your host, Harrison Ma. This podcast sets the loving intention of creating the mystical space needed to pull back the layers restricting health, alignment, and love. Now let's walk you home to your cosmic spiritual heart space. Good evening, morning, afternoon, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Cosmic Love Antenna. And today you found yourself on a special, extra special bonus episode with myself and more of myself being interviewed on another podcast with some deep diving topics and subjects that I know is going to hit your heart. I was invited onto the Connected Conversations platform with the beautiful Emma from Unique Phoenix. And we talked a lot about my journey around what I'm doing in this world at this current moment and the bigger themes of cosmic healing through spiritual, mystical love. So I wanted to release this episode on my platform to give Emma a bit more love and also give you another piece of content to help you connect back in to your cosmic love antenna. I hope you enjoy.
I've got to say, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited about being in your vibration as well, because it's really beautiful. I love the alignment. And I'm so curious about your background. Like, how did you get here?
So first of all, thank you for having me, my friend. It's nice to be in, I spend so much time creating space for other people. And I was just thinking, I was meditating before our chat, and it's just nice to be in a divine feminine energy that's creating a space. So I want to honor you first. To answer your question, there were many sort of pivotal roles and spaces and places that created me. But I would say the biggest turning point is that I had a big sort of spiritual awakening, dark night of the ego event in my mid-20s, where everything up to that point that I had deemed as valuable was pulled away from me, and actually was now telling me that I was a criminal, I was a horrible person, and that everything I thought was not correct, put very simply. Does that answer your question?
Wow. That must have been, and interestingly enough, that it happened in your mid-20s, because
Yes.
obviously that's when you're coming into, like in every human experience, we come into this fullness of our brain, and suddenly there's this view that widens and we get to see things really differently. So that's really interesting that it happened at that point for you.
Yeah, I've looked at it very carefully, and I think you're beautifully intuitively picking up. At the time I didn't see it. Obviously, I was like, "Oh, what the hell is going on?" But as I reflect, hindsight's 2020. It couldn't have happened at a better state, right? Because it happened just before Saturn returns, right? For people that are, aware of all that, and it actually allowed me to, you can't see it listening, but I have my own little home, and it allowed me to create my own little cave, so I could, metaphorically and physically, retreat back into to ask the deeper questions to then step back out into the world again.
Oh, I love that. And, I've actually looked back on my journey knowing what I know now and having the hindsight and understanding that I actually rejected those moments. I definitely
Yeah.
had those moments in when I was coming into my fullness as, a human and that deeper understanding. And I actually rejected it at the time and kept on a numbing path and just, didn't want to actually face everything and waited till my 30s to do it. But, we've all got to wake up at some stage.
Well, I think that's the beautiful thing too. It's and maybe we'll speak about this, but when I say love, when I refer to love, I truly refer to love as a higher power, and
Mm,
that love as a higher power is unconditional.
yes.
So when we do have a option in our soul path to take a certain direction, and for whatever reason we pick one way or the other, if it's not the optimal choice, then there's no judgment there. There's no person on a cloud keeping score. But what it happens is that it will come around again to give us that same possibility, right?
Yep. And it's come around several times. And to deepen that to deepen that as well, which is beautiful. It's welcomed. And absolutely, there's no judgment when I look back over it. It's
Yeah.
just noticing. I just go, oh, that's wow. Wow, that was actually an opportunity and I chose a different way. And I'm grateful that I did because I've been able to use that in my own work. Um, so I love that. And beautiful. When I use the word love, I am actually talking about that
Yeah.
oneness,
Yeah.
the deep connection that we have through it. It's not necessarily just a feeling within me because love's an action, love's an energy. So
Yeah.
it is so much more than we give it. I say it to my kids all the time when they're like, oh, I'll have a sip of my tea. And I'm like, loving that. And they go, so much love. And I'm like, well, it's good for me. I'm having pine needle tea. So it's great for me. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
And,
Yeah, go.
and just for the people out there, because what you're hitting on here is it's so easy to overlook what you're saying. And I just I want to speak to maybe the religious listeners that you may have.
Mm,
I I grew up Catholic and religious, and so much love for people out there that are still within that belief system. But for me, there was always something that disconnected me from my power and my truth within that belief system. And it wasn't until I made that click and that understanding of what you were just describing that, oh wait, this higher power, this God, essence, divine source, whatever your name is for it, I can insert love into that space. And now that really resonates.
yeah.
That really opens something in me that says, oh, this is truth. This is truth here.
Yeah. Well, that's the truth of who we are. We are love. It's that simple. Someone says to me, who are you? Who are you, Emma? Tell me about yourself. I'm love.
Done.
And I might fuck up in that every now and again, but that's okay. Like there's that space as well for it. Um, oh, that's beautiful. Can we go back? Because I actually want to open that little
Please.
line for Saturn, because
Yeah.
that's something that's been newly presented to me. So I would like to hear what you're referring to explain to everybody else, because I think it's really powerful to know that.
The Saturn returns and explain that whole series. Yeah.
Mm.
So I'm I'm yet to be pulled, and I can't wait till I go there. But I'm yet to be pulled deep into the astrology world. But I can see it. It's definitely on my life path, and it's coming. But Saturn returns, I think, is the gateway for all people into it. For me, it was. And put very simply, for people that are new to this term, it's often the stage in a soul's journey, 20, 28, 29, 30, 31. People have varying journeys with it. That, trying to not go into a whole big thing here, it is the place in which our spirit body, our soul body anchors. And what I mean by that is we are a holistic being of systems, and we are multidimensional in many ways. So, explaining that very briefly, we have a physical body, we have a mental body, we have a emotional body, and we have a deep spiritual, soulful body. And the lower 3D bodies, the physical, the mental, the emotional, we don't have a choice in whether they embody through us, right? We all know this when we get triggered, or we get lost in a belief system, or we have physical disease, that we don't have a choice here. But the soulful spiritual body, we actually have a choice in whether we anchor it or not. And you've actually spoken about this already in this chat today. You said that the option came around for you and you made a choice to go another direction, then it came around again.
Mm.
This is in many ways what the Saturn returns is. It is an opportunity for each soul to decide through the power of free will whether they want to now start embodying what their unique frequency of love is on this journey.
And because Saturn, when it comes up, is let's look at the dark night of your soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's look at the shit.
Yeah.
And if you choose to, like, we've obviously experienced the power of that in our lives. And if you don't, then you keep going down a very different rabbit hole, and that's okay. There's no judgment. It's just a choice that you make, but it does keep coming around for you. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I've had some powerful understanding about how much Saturn impacts the moon and the energy from the moon. And I'm in the process of downloading stuff around that as well. So it's pretty exciting.
Well, and I'll just say, just for people listening, if this is resonating with you and you're still new to your relationship to the stars, I would encourage you to lean in. And it doesn't mean, getting deep into astrology and getting deep into, your signs and human design and gene keys. You definitely can go down that route, but I'll just plant this seed. We are truly the microcosm of the macrocosm, right? And that relationship is as small as, each of my cells in my liver is an expression of my bigger body, to as big as I, as this person, am literally made of stardust, right? And everything inside of me is an expression of every single planet that is out there, all right? So just wanted to add that.
Oh, no, I love that, because that's the purity of, I don't have the human words sometimes to explain things, but that's the purity of our connection, is that here we are on this, however you want to believe whether we're on a rolling rock or we're on a flat planet, whatever you want to believe it is, I don't care. We're still here, dream or otherwise, here we are. But we are all interconnected, and it is by that energy that we have. And if you are new to it and it's something that is sparking a curiosity, then this is what the podcast is all about, is just lean into your curiosity. When I feel aligned to someone, I'll reach out and go, hey, I've got a podcast, can I interview you? And here we are.
And it gives us direction, right? We spend so much time, and I know and it sounds like you in your story too, but in my story, we spend so much time asking, what am I here to do? What's my reason? What's my why? I think it's intrinsically a part of us. And I think we're brainwashed, we're programmed to just be asking the question and not expecting an answer. But I just want to promote that the answers are there. We just need to listen. We just need to, and this is why I really appreciate you holding this sacred space for me today. We often need to listen in a state of being, like in a feminine receptivity, right? This is, I don't want to go off on a whole big topic here, but I think this is why we're transitioning into such a divine feminine era, because we need it. We need the feminine both at a collective level and at an individual level, so we can start listening to what our inner world is actually saying.
Yeah, I really deeply believe that. And just to add, it's not that we need to be ruled by the feminine, because actually the feminine I don't want to actually rule. I'll be straight. I am happy to be led by the masculine, not toxic masculine, however, divine masculine, something that can come in and lead. I'm happy for that. I like that, having that container that I can, stretch out and find out about. But we all do need that at the moment. And it's within each and every one of us to have the balance of both, to be, I'm a container in my work.
That's the word there, right? Balance. That's the word.
And I feel like as we lean towards the feminine and understand it more deeply, not that I don't need a masculine man to be more feminine. You know, I don't need you to be more sensitive. I don't need any of that. You're actually very intuitive. Just be yourself in the truth. So I want to ask you, and I love that you're touching. Oh God, we could talk about so many things
Yeah.
in here. I'm trying to stick to my questions, my curiosity, but again, and I do want to keep saying this, if something sparks your interest in here, one, ask us questions
Yeah.
below and I will get back to you. And also ask those questions of yourself, because for me, the truth of it is we're born to feel good, right? Like that's the purpose, is to be ourselves. Yeah. Just whoever that is in the moment. Because I don't know about you, I change. I'm going to change after this conversation. Yeah. And the purpose is to feel good in it, because we've got nerve endings on our little, on the edges of our skin, right there on the tip of our skin. I don't know about you, when I feel good and touch nicely, I'm like, that feels delicious and rich.
Alignment.
Whoo! And you keep following that.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with following your pleasure and your desire. It's actually what we've been born to do. And you mentioned it before. We've been programmed to believe that it's hard work, that we actually have to feel a whole bunch of shit to get to that nirvana.
Yeah.
Actually, it's quite the opposite.
Heaven is here. Enlightenment is here, right? Heaven, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. It's not a external space and place that we need to suffer and do all the things to get to. It is in the only moment that matters, and it's here right now. But we need to make a choice, much like anchoring the soul body through the Saturn returns. We need to make a choice to allow it to flow.
Yeah. 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 Just letting that land. I love that. Love that richness. I would love to understand what have been some of the most surprising things that have come up in your journey, in your healing, in your growth.
Cool. Good question. So the first thing that comes to as I tune into that, so a big part of my work currently, and I'm so happy that you said we're constantly evolving, because that is, as I go deeper into my because we've talked about now astrological chart and my gene keys and my human design, that's a really big part of my unique soul's expression. And we all have it. We all have that unfolding nature and that changing nature, but my soul in particular, has that on like speed dial. It's just like it's constantly, and my biggest challenge is sort of getting out of my own way, not staying within a particular mask for too long. But currently, I would say, the biggest surprises that have come along this path for me is one of the biggest things I stand for in this moment. And it is when I work with someone, I coach someone, I hold space for someone, I use my healing modalities. I'm not giving them anything. I'm not adding on to them. What my role is, and this becomes deeper and deeper the more I do it, is I become a smudge-free mirror of love for them, right? And I hold that sacred space with my tools, with my unique frequency long enough so they can be reminded, and you've already said it today, but they can be reminded of what their unique frequency is. Because I think that is the biggest awareness and surprise that I've come to, that I've also realized that this is not a me thing. This is something we can learn to copy and paste in all of our unique ways. And I'll land with this because I could talk for a while. And we can copy and paste in all our unique ways and then ripple that out into the collective, right? Ripple that out, like we said before, from the micro into the macro.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's so true. So true. I mean, yep. That's it. We're just mirrors, and and also we reflect out what's within us as well.
Yeah.
I often say that, like what's coming out of this hole in your face is what's within you.
Yeah.
What you're feeling, what you're thinking. So if it's not great and you're not getting great feedback, then change what's going on.
And it's so big what you're saying, right? This is like, it's, if anyone's going to take any healing rule, if you want to call it that, or healing belief or healing, practice, it's whenever you feel triggered by something externally, right? One of my good friends, she's coined this term that I really love to just endorse and say is, all judgment is self-judgment, right? And all externalization that we feel towards something that happens on the outside, person, place, or thing, is an opportunity to reflect back inwards to see, why do I feel angry because of that? Why do I feel guilty because of that? Why do I feel tightness in my chest because of that? Why does my throat close up because of that, right? It's all an opportunity to pull back another layer that is restricting your beautiful light.
Yeah. Yeah, I've my girlfriend gave me this, like, the activations, and I love it, right? Because I'm like, you're right, actually. I don't know if I'm triggered, I'm activated though.
Yeah.
Something happens, and that can be positive, like how I view something as enriching, and like have been activated really beautifully. My ears ring and I go, oh, and then I'll
Yeah.
vibrate differently and I think, oh, I've just downloaded something, wonder what that is.
Yeah.
But then there's the activation where my body goes and
Yes.
constricts. And I think, ooh, let's take a look at that one. And
What?
you'll know when an activation's ended, because I don't know about you, but the universe will bring you that back.
Oh, yeah.
Because you go, I've got this. Woo! I'm doing it now. I know what's going on. And then the universe comes and says, show me, beautiful soul, show me what
Prove
you've
it.
got. Yeah. And you go, oh, fuck. I didn't have all of it. I've got a little bit to go in there.
And it shows you because it is you.
Yes.
Right. Let's break that down a little bit. Because this is, again, you talk about, again, this is another sort of understanding and breakthrough that I've come to on my journey, in line with your question, right? And this is such a cliche thing to say in the spiritual community, but it's so true. It's a cliche for a reason. The illusion of separation is truly that. It is an illusion, right? Everything, I'm heavy deep right now in this moment in sort of the Vedic worldview, and I'm sure maybe you have some understanding around it. And the Vedic worldview teaches many things, right? It's the origin of yoga. It's the origins of Ayurveda. It's the deep core of most Eastern perspectives, and it teaches that there is no objective outside reality, right? There is just our internal self interacting with our external self, right? And I say self as both the small self, the ego that we are, that puts on all those masks, and the capital S self, which is the universe, which is still us. So going back to what you're saying, right? Of course, it's going to keep reflecting and keep showing us things because it's us. And this is the last thing I'll say here. It wants to do that because it wants to keep experiencing love, right? What is love, right? Love is the connection between at least two things. So it needs to keep experiencing contrast. Otherwise, we never would have expressed ourselves from the oneness.
Yeah, I'm reading the Kabbalion at the moment. I'm loving
Love
it.
it.
And the different laws and, polarities, like
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about here. You've got to, in order to see love, we've got to be showing the other side of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I think the last couple of years has really shown us where we're actually anchored as
Yeah.
a collective. And for many of us, moving away from that, and changing and rising above where the base collective is, and choosing a different path on that. But it's been really eyes wide open to see, wow, as a world where we've been sitting in that polarity, and it's pretty low vibrationally.
It's low vibration, and it's a gift, right? It's like you've asked about my story today. I started my business like my business. I didn't start my business, but the big shift, I transitioned from in local, just meeting local people, to actually stepping out into the world. Like I shifted my business into online mostly as soon as the pandemic hit, right? So it was the point in time where I actually transitioned. I got more certifications and did all the things. But I'm not alone in that, right? There's been a global shift and awakening. There's been a global this polarity and all this death and destruction and segregation and isolation and fear. It's existed as equally as all of these beautiful people that are remembering their light, right? A short story here. I live in a small town. For people that are familiar with Australia, I live in Coffs Harbour. It's a little beachy town on the East Coast, and I love my community, but in the most loving way possible. It's been asleep for a very long time in many ways. And now, right, I go to the local beach and there's murals on the beach. There's people making like stacks of little heart rocks where people are putting hearts together. People are making mandalas on the sand, and it's just I can feel it. The collective has shifted, and I don't think this is just a small town in Australia thing. It's happening at a global level.
I agree. Yeah, conversations for me have shifted. I've always been in this space for a long time, and I'm having people approach me wanting to have deeper conversations
Yeah,
and wanting to bring up things that I'm like, whoa, here we are, I'm in.
yeah,
Let's have a conversation about this. So, what are some of the common layers? Because you talk about peeling back
yeah,
the onion, and obviously you've peeled back your own because, I always say there's always another layer,
yeah.
in whatever you've experienced in life. Just wait for that to hook back around and see what else is there and, delve on into the deliciousness of it. But what are some of the common layers that you see with people coming to you?
So thank you for this question. So the two big ones that I'm currently working with a lot is the inner child
Mhm.
healing, and ancestral healing. So breaking ancestral chains. And both of these, if you've done this kind of work before, they sort of blend together in many ways. But put simply, just for people that are new to it, I would classify inner child healing as helping people move through the conditioning they've grown up in their childhood, whether it be through trauma, whether it be through religious pains, whether it be through family abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, even just, a big one for me in my journey was the suppression of my voice, right? Being told that, I'm a boy that should not express his emotions, that should not be sensitive. I should be seen, not heard, right? This is a very common trauma that most of us just push aside because it's not extreme, but conditions a whole population of men who now don't speak their emotions, who don't speak their feelings, who don't tune into their divine feminine. And then you have ancestral healing, which is, I would separate because now we go further back. Now we see within the individual where either their mother line or their father line is impacting their current expression. So, for example, let's say that, and this is a real one for me, my grandfather who grew up in the Depression, he has a very particular fixed mindset around abundance and money, right? And is very frugal around spending money and spending and keeping everything tight. And there's this outside force that's going to come in and take it away. So we have to be very fearful around what we spend. Obviously, we don't live in a depression anymore. We don't live in a time where there is, we won't talk about the recession, but you get the idea. So what we can start to do is look inside of ourselves down these ancestral lines and see where either these thought forms, these beliefs, or these suppressed emotions are restricting us, and then taking a choice, making our choice to let them go and break free of them.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And absolutely, because it is that, I think people can, if people have experienced healing, and I would offer this, and you've not experienced a shift or a change, then I would always go back to my clients and say, well, we downloaded some actions. How did you go
Yeah.
with those? And if you've not taken them, then the energy is going to find its
Continue.
way, come on back to you. It knows you. It wants to hang out with you. It's been there a while. So it'll just keep on coming back in and going, hey, I'm here again. And your body receives it because it's actually quite known. So you have to
Yes.
make actual changes in your life in order to allow the healing and the disconnection from that to
Yeah.
transmute and change.
It's so important, right? I was just talking to a friend about this today, right? This is where, again, because we've talked about this already, the balance between the feminine and the masculine comes up, right? And an example I would give is often how I facilitate this kind of healing is through deep meditative journeys that I take people on.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, that's the feminine, right? I facilitate a safe space that allows for that feminine to allow for the flowing of those emotions or those belief systems to come out of the unconscious into conscious awareness to be seen. But then, as you beautifully just highlighted, before those float back down into the unconscious from the conscious awareness, we need to use our masculine, take action to rewrite or to integrate or to release the things that need to be seen that aren't serving us. And if that is not done, and again, no judgment, but it's going to float back down into the unconscious to then project outwards into our outside world until it gets our attention again.
I would like to go and talk to you about some wounded masculine stuff, because often we can get, like I've had to move through that in my own journey and understand that, a lot of, because of past trauma, I was really living from a wounded feminine and wounded masculine space. And let's face it, we are in a wounded masculine container collectively, like on that mass, scale. And so how does that impede it? Like, what happens if, great, we're doing this work, but it's a wounded masculine that comes in and wants to take action? What happens there?
Well, the first thing, as you ask that question, is we need to make it feel safe. So what I mean by that is it's wounded for a reason, right? The wounded masculine, I can just speak from my story, right? It's the reason that it's fearful, or it's maybe overbearing, or it's leading to an external situation that's not for our best interest, is because it's probably in a fight or flight response, right? It's probably in a hyper vigilant, being a triggered response. So in any situation, how do we approach that? Well, the first step I would say is create a container where it feels safe, right? Create a container where it feels safe enough to either settle down a bit or to allow for that feminine inside of us to come up, for the balance to come up. An example would be going back to the speaking example of the inner child, the boy that was told that they should not voice, right, and should not express. How we can start to heal that wounded masculine is letting him know that his expression, his sensitivities, his vulnerabilities are also his power, right? Just like how the masculine power is in healthy structure, in control, in a healthy container. A man can also be powerful when he's being sensitive, right? A man can also be powerful when he's being open and vulnerable and channeling all of his love with the world. So just to summarize that, I think one, it's the safe container that's created, and two, it's a reconditioning with what it looks like to be a healthy, powerful man. And even if that powerful man is not control. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I love what you've said. It's really become clear to me over my time in doing my own work and working with clients around it, is that it's all around safety when you're in the wounded female or wounded masculine. And what became really evident for me was a man's superpower is actually in his heart.
Yeah.
So we talk about the feminine being from the heart and and that's actually, for me, not necessarily true, because my heart's always open and I can have my heart broken. I'm good, because I'll just keep rolling. Like, I'm feminine. So I love that. I love, come in, roll around in there, not hurt me. But for me, it's been about understanding energy, my physical body.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I'm more impacted with. That's the part that I want to protect. That's the part that I want to have great little boundaries around, is protecting my body, because I create from that space. But men actually create really well. Masculine creates really well from the heart. So, when they're feeling like they have to protect their heart, of course they won't be open, won't be able to create very well. But when a man feels like he can be open in his heart and create from that space, whoo. And we've really, for me, that's, got to get into that deeper understanding that men protect their hearts for a reason.
Yeah.
And women protect their bodies for a reason, because that's our divine nature.
Yeah.
And when we don't need to, when we can, as a feminine, when I can surrender, woo, let's go. And go.
And I was just going to say, I'm basking in your channel right now. A lot's coming through you. I love it. I would just say that safety, just for people listening, that safety can be given to us either by ourselves, because I want to make this very clear, either through, because this is when we talk about inner child healing, this is what the whole idea of reparenting is. We reparent our inner child to help it heal. But also, and I say this to all the men, right, specifically, because we're talking about the masculine, it can also be with another person, like a feminine touch, or receive a masculine feminine touch, right? To really allow myself to be held, not just by myself, right? Because that's a big thing in itself, but also allowing myself to be received and to be held, and to someone to create a safe container of safety, support, and security by an external person, right? And that doesn't need to be a coach, a practitioner, a therapist, a doctor. Go for it if you feel like that's needed. But it could. I started learning that with my family. Right? The first person who told me how to create, or showed me, more importantly, how to create a loving space where that safety can be felt, was my sister. Right? And again, I'm not unique to this. I would encourage all men to explore this with their people they love very much.
Yeah, look, I 100% agree. And I've got my son is 15, and I love watching his emergence of the masculine come out, and the way that he will be out doing something and he'll give me a container automatically without. And I always honor that and share that with him and say, hey, that was really cool that
Powerful.
you did that. Yeah. And my daughter, I can really see her feminine, the receptiveness, all coming through. But you're right. For me, the more we have moved away from family, the more we've lost this, this energy, the purity of it. And the more we come home to family, and, whether that's created or born into, we can actually experience this in a really beautiful way, because there is that space to receive, and there is that space to be contained, and to know that it's a really powerful thing as a female to allow that to happen, and for a man to contain with his heart from truth. I love that. That would have been beautiful. How old were you when you had that experience with your sister?
Oh, it's continual, but the first one was a couple of years ago now, I would say. It was the first one. She's on her own journey at the moment, and funny enough, she's in her own Saturn returns now. But she just does it naturally, right? She just does it. It's one of her superpowers that, she has yet to step into it fully, and she's on her own path. But yeah, it's a couple of years ago, and I think she continues. Whenever I share this story, she's the first person that pops into my head, because it shows an example of, we help people when we don't even realize, right? And this is sort of another message that I love to express, is when we stand in our light, even if we're doing it unconsciously, we can't underestimate what impact that is having on the people around us, right? It's so easy for us to overlook that and I see this in myself, that it's only the conscious actions that I'm taking that are impacting people that I love, or helping people that I want to help. But it's also often the unconscious actions that we're making that ripples out too. So it's, the thing that she did for me was an example of that. She wasn't doing it with something very intentional in mind. She was just doing it because it's a part of her. And I ask myself the question, when I think about that, how many of us are doing that all the time? And what would it look like if we consciously stepped into it?
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. And I've been doing, my mum, bless her soul, not here for about 20 years or so, but she told me this story as a teenager. And I talked about being a teacher, or I was always drawn to be in this kind of space. And she shared with me, I don't know what happened, but she shared with me a story that one day we were catching up with friends in a backyard, and we were all sitting on a trampoline, and her and her mum were doing the dishes, and they looked up and they saw us on a trampoline in a circle, and I was asking them questions. I was like,
very cute.
And I said to her, how old was I? She was, oh, you must have been about 7. But I was like, how do you feel about that? Wow, that's sad that happened. Like, that was a bit mean. Are you okay? And just getting them and asking them to share stories. She said that I was there for a good half an hour or longer, and they just sat there watching, like, because
I think it's intrinsic. So this is like, you're hitting on something very important here. So we've spoken a lot today about spiritual soul that we are, right?
Mm.
But we're also a human being. We're a beautiful human animal. And this human animal has evolved for thousands of years in what kind of setting? It's evolved in tribes, it's evolved in communities, it's evolved in small collectives of very connected individuals with the intention of connection, support, healing, and growth. It's only been very recently, since we've segregated ourselves into these little houses, that we don't have that anymore, but it's still in us. Right. So as you explain that beautiful story, that's all the image I was getting. It's a part of our genetic being in many ways, right?
Absolutely, it's a core need to connect.
Yeah.
Like it's the core of us, and that's the core of love is connection because it's energy and it's connection and it's oneness. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Watching the progression, and I use the term evolve very loosely because, and I'm very open about the fact that as humans we have not evolved internally. We have not even reached a tenth of the potential of how we can connect. And we've only evolved externally. And I don't know about you, but it's not all been great.
No. Well, and it goes back to what's happening in the world at the moment, right? Again, we don't live in my opinion, we don't live in a universe where we are a victim or things happen to us. We live in a universe where everything's happening for a reason, and all external events, there's a reason, there's a bigger intention behind it. So I agree with you. And I think what we're seeing in the external collective is a pain teacher and a shadow to help us see that, right? Because maybe we've spent a long time ignoring it and numbing it like we do as individuals.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was a real a painful layer for me to move through, was to understand everything that I experienced through childhood and the self-abuse that I continued in my teenage years and the relationship I went into in my early 20s. It was, a really kind of bitter pill to swallow, to say that that happened for a reason. And look, here it is. And the container that I hold for clients is limitless because of those experiences.
Yes.
Because of all of that, I can sit there in someone's darkest shadow
Yes.
and move them into it
And see it, right?
and love it
Yes,
and welcome it.
because it's you, right? It's again, again, we come back to the universe and the self-experiencing self, right? It's uh, a way that I would frame what you're saying is everything is self-love, right? I think we often get caught in, oh, I don't have time for self-love because I have all these responsibilities. I have a family, I have a business, I have friends. But within that, we miss the deeper sort of spiritual understanding that even when we do make the time for our family, for our friends, for our business, that is still self-love, because what we love in another person is either something that exists inside of us already, or it's something that we want to be healed, we want to be integrated, or it's a shadow that we've yet to acknowledge, right?
Yeah, I love the vibration of that. That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's you, my friend. It's the space that you create. So I receive it, but I'll throw it back at you.
Thank you. So yeah, for people listening, understand really deep, and I love that you keep coming back to it because it's so incredibly important to understand that we choose the families that we come
Oh,
into.
yeah.
And we choose them from a space of divine love. We choose them from a
Yes.
place of, I'm going to go down on this earth and this is what I'm going to do. And, we get here and then go, oh, fuck. Maybe I can't, because not everyone's showing up in that divineness
Yeah.
either. So then, you've got to muddle your way through all of that. But we make a choice to connect with the people that we connect with and to bring into our lives. And it's not all sunshine and moonbeams, but here we are having the experiences that we are and being able to bring people like phenomenal healing and
And
insight.
and I'll just say, because this is so important to what I've noticed to help with that struggle that you're hitting on, right? Between like we understand and we have this on my podcast I've talked a lot about the life between lives and the predetermination of those soul contracts that you're talking about, the soul family, even the soul wounds, right? Predetermined wounds that are activated in the inner child and all these things, right? And without going off into all those different topics, I think something that's helped me move through the struggle of people's free will within that is learning to distinguish between the head and the heart, right? Because this is something that we often, and again, this goes back to the conditioning, right? We grow up in a world that's 99% mental, right? We an education system that I wasn't taught about my intuition growing up. I wasn't taught about my soul and my spirit growing up. I was told, right, unless you went to a Steiner school or a Waldorf school, which most of us don't, you were told that the one power that you have is this thinking brain. And I'm here to say that we need to love that thinking brain, but we also need to understand that the mind and the ego isn't the only part of us. We have this deep and powerful spiritual, soulful heart that at any point in time where we feel lost, i.e., in that situation that you're talking about of soul contracts and soul family and someone picking a different choice and causing tension inside of us, at that point in time, we can then decide to drop into our hearts and ask, okay, what is the choice I need to make here? Not the choice from my ego, not the choice from further separation and fear, but a choice that I can make from love that's going to help me take a step forward, that's going to help me feel good, rather than exacerbate the fear or exacerbate the tension or exacerbate the pain.
Oh, I love that. And God, I could talk for that about for hours, just that
I
alone.
felt it, my friend. I felt it.
However, I'm mindful of time and I want to ask about galactic soul remembrance because that's something that I've not necessarily heard of,
Yeah.
but I have in healing done
Yeah.
off-planet healing.
Yeah.
So I'm guided by that and I go
Yeah.
there, but I did it without any kind of basis of knowledge. Uh,
That's exactly what it is. So you've already, so for people that are new to that term, I like it's just something that I how do I want to say this? So my training, my energy training, a little bit from the Czech Institute, most of it's from Reiki. I have a little bit of background in deep meditative states and activation states, but that galactic soul remembrance has been purely just my experience, which sounds very similar to yours. And I've noticed the deeper I go with clients, and also the deeper I've gone into my soul, it takes us to deeper and deeper stages of what our soul's frequency is. And for the sake of time, just to summarize what this means is we have a soul that incarnates lifetime to lifetime. We can understand that. We've talked about that today.
mhm.
And but that soul, for most of us, hasn't just incarnated here on this earth. It, based off how old our soul is, maybe we've all heard the term of an old soul, right? That soul most likely has had a history in other planets, in other forms, in other dimensions. So one, it's that. Two, even now, here in this moment, me and you here in this physical form, my soul is not just here in this physical form, right? I have a multidimensional light body that has different aspects of itself in in different areas of the universe. Okay, so I'm trying to make this very quick. So when I say galactic remembrance of soul's gifts and abilities, it's tapping both into the past life remembrance of actual lives we've had in past incarnations, and it's also connecting into the soul that you are currently and the lives you're living in different areas, so you can express the gifts here in this 3D form on this planet. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And you've spoken about it a lot, is that tapping into intuition, tapping into
Yeah,
heart. And the more that you tap into it, the more open you are to receive the variety of frequencies, the
yeah.
variety of, you know, flavors of you. Is what I
Yes,
like
that's a
to
good way
call
of
it.
describing it. Flavors, yeah.
Yeah, because you know, from the feminine space, that's something that I've really had to learn, and particularly being a mum as well, is that I can still have a lot of flavors
Yeah.
and be a mum. You know, like I don't have to fit into a particular role, which
No.
is something many women need to move through. That we have this ideal, and it's the same as men. And so I actually want to just speak into that. How do wounds show up in behavior. So if we're talking about wounded feminine, wounded masculine, how can they show up in our behavior?
Many ways, but the biggest way that comes up as soon as you ask that question is through our projections, right? So
Mm,
I spoke about it before, right? Most of our wounds are unconscious, right? And that's for a very good reason. At the point in time, they go unconscious to protect us, right? So if I was abandoned and rejected as a child and I haven't healed and integrated that, then there's going to be protection mechanisms that first activate, and then if we're not aware of them, they shift back into the unconscious.
mm,
However, in my experience, that fight or flight state of constantly looking outside of ourselves for that thing that's trying to get us, that is not a state of balance. That is not a state of homeostasis. And that homeostasis state is our birthright. Right? Let me be very clear with people listening. If you're in a state of dis-ease, if you're in a state of constantly being triggered, if you're in a state of constantly being, again, hypervigilant, you aren't in your natural state. You're in a fight or flight, hypervigilant, or imbalanced state. So what I'm saying is there is a force that is inside of you that's constantly trying to get you back to a balanced state. And if you're not going inwards to see it, it's going to project outwards into the outside world. And I say this with inverted commas. Remember, the outside world is another reflection of you, but it will project outside of you to get your attention so you can see the inner wounds. So to
mm,
say this more simply, it'll come up in our triggers, right? It'll come up in our projections. It'll come up. I'll give a very simple example. If I walk into a room with my dad and my dad's in a state of anger, right? And I walk into that room and now his state of anger has caused me to be now in a deep state of anger. We can ask the question, is he giving me that anger? Maybe to a small degree. Or is what is actually happening, he is activating and bringing up that unhealed, unresolved, unreleased anger inside of me that needs to be seen.
mm. I'm a parent of three. I get it. Because it's easy as a parent to go, oh God, they just annoy me or whatever. But actually, when you choose to go within and to say, well, hang on a second, what's coming up here? Why is this coming up? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm being activated. It's in me.
Yeah.
What is it? And look, there are some things, when you have to ask your children to clean their room 50 times over a week and it's not done, you get frustrated. And then they say, why are you yelling at me? Because I'm fucking sick of asking you. But at the same time, I say it like that, I will laugh because they know that like this only love underneath it.
Yeah.
I don't want to bring wild animals into my home. Thanks. So just keep it nice. But there are other times. There was a beautiful example of that of my daughter the other morning. My other daughter had gone bananas and I fed back to her. I wasn't angry. I hadn't been piqued, but she was just she's a 10-year-old. So they're egotistical maniacs. They can't help themselves, right? That's just the stage of life that they're in. And she was just being angry with everyone. So I fed that back to her and very quickly she didn't like the feedback. My other older daughter then started to get angry. And I was like, why are you angry? We got in the car because no one was talking to her. Get in the car and she's saying bye to me. She goes, I was just angry because you were angry. And I said, that's something we'll have to look at after.
Yeah.
And she was like,
Bit of ancestral pieces there.
yeah, there is definitely. But it's just interesting. And it's actually from her dad's side because I've healed my ancestral line on both sides. So we know where it comes from. But it was just funny because even she was like, well, I don't know because you were angry.
Well, and I think the humor in itself is healing, right? I think we overlook like this is a reminder to me as much as it is to everyone. We feel like this spiritual, it's mental and emotional, but a big part of it's spiritual, right? We think that the spiritual healing journey needs to be one of just constant grind and doing the work, but in my experience, the more fun and the more awe and the more curiosity and the more laughter we can add to it, the better, right?
Yeah, well, that always shows me where I am in my feminine.
Yeah.
If I'm in a wounded state, I'll be very serious and I won't find the playfulness. But if I'm in my beautiful state of feminine, then I'll find the fun. I'll find the playfulness through it. So, that shows me my behavior. So I want to ask you then, if for people listening, what does disconnection look like? If they're, because some people would be listening to this and not necessarily, and thinking, well, I'm connected. What does disconnection look like?
So a couple of big symptoms. I don't like calling them symptoms because there is such a big root to it, but let's say symptoms, let's say signs. One, I would look at your adult relationships, like we've just been talking about for the last 5 minutes, right? Are they balanced? Or do you find you're constantly being triggered, being wounded, feeling attacked, feeling rejected, feeling abandoned, right? The best first place to begin is your adult relationships, especially with the inner child and ancestral stuff, as we were just talking about, right? The second space is in your physical body. And I call this an external symptom, much like the relationships, because our physical body is the last space and place a mental, emotional, or spiritual challenge will show up, right? It's your body keeps score and your body tells the story of your life. So if you're having physical dis-ease across any kind of chronic plane, it's so important. And I'm not overlooking the physical modalities and the physical things we need to be mindful of course. This is an and, not an or. But we can look at our physical challenges, right? And if I have chronic IBS, if I have chronic thyroid challenges, if I have chronic womb and sexual dysfunction, right? These are physical symptoms of a most likely an emotional, mental, spiritual dysfunction and challenge that we can, and disconnection that we can lean into. The final thing, the final biggest symptom, and I've seen this in my life consistently, is through our relationship with abundance, specifically our relationship with money. And we could do a whole episode on this, but just asking yourself, am I in a fearful, scarce mentality, or am I in an open, abundant, powerful mentality when it comes to money? Because money, much like the physical body and our external relationships, is a mirror. It is a mirror for what is not, we're not seeing internally. So I would say they're the three big areas we can look for the disconnection.
Oh, I love that. That's been one of my journeys as well, is the more I've owned my value as a
Yeah.
soul, not necessarily in just my working life, but as a human being and as a soul, and actually owning how loving and deeply connected and welcoming I am, that has shifted my abundance greatly, because it's about the value, not because I'm of value to other people,
Yeah.
but just,
You
knowing
you
that
are the abundance.
yes.
It's you, right? And just so people hear this, right? Because you're beautifully highlighting it. It's you are abundant already, right? Abundance we can equate with that love, right? And you've never not been worthy of love, just like you've never not been worthy of abundance. If if something on the external is saying otherwise, right, there's something inside of you again that is either consciously or most likely unconsciously making a choice to not allow you to feel it.
Mm, that's, I love how you've explained that. It's so, yes. I love it, because that's the truth.
Yeah.
That is the truth. Abundance is a deep reflection of love. How you're receiving it, how you're giving it, it's just a reflection. So, take a look at it. People often don't like to look in the mirror. I had a client once that said to me, I feel like my resting bitch face is really affecting people, but I don't know how to stop it. And I said to her, here's a practice. When you're walking past a shop window, just look and see what you look like. Not for judgment, just notice what you look like. And she did, and she said, oh my God. And I go, so we do this in yoga, and it's, in the moment of moving into a hard pose, just a little smile, just a tiny little smile. And she's like, okay. And it changed, and it completely opened up things. And she said she had people approaching her, and just that tiny little
Yeah.
openness, because very
Choice.
absolutely, and awareness of self. Like,
Yeah.
how do I look? Not because it's you want to look like to the outside world, but how do I actually look? Because it's a reflection of how I feel on the inside. What am I reflecting out? Delicious. I have final 3 whats for you.
Ooh,
I know.
excited.
So what is well-being to you?
Balance.
Mm.
Balance and homeostasis. Like we were, like, because the more I get deeper into this journey across all the spectrums, right? Mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, like we've been talking about today, it's balance, right? And balance isn't static, it is dynamic. I think the beautiful analogy that it describes it is the seesaw, right? There's the two kids on the teeter-totter of the seesaw. It's not up, stagnant, it's not down, stagnant, it's not even in the center. It's one that's sort of moving back and forth in a rhythmic kind of way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. And what are your daily must-do well-being practices?
Ooh, these are good questions, my friend. I like them. I would say something I'm going to do right after this conversation is a nap. Have a powerful 20-minute power nap. That's a must. It's just a beautiful reset for me. Uh, Must is the food that I consume. So not just the what, the quality, but also just the reverence. Like eating for me throughout the day is as a devotion, is a prayer. So really making my food, my meals, a devotional, non-negotiable act of love to myself and the things that I'm consuming, right? Because that's a whole other conversation, but we miss the interaction with the energy that we're exchanging within our food. So that's a devotional act. And then you said 3, right? And
I
then
don't know how many
uh,
whatever you've got. What are your daily must-do practices?
I guess, and then 2 more I'll say is one is movement, movement of some kind. And whether this be, lifting heavy things, whether this be dancing, whether this be, you mentioned yoga. I'm a big fan of yin yoga, holding a pose and feeling the fascia open up and feeling, even that is emotional in many ways. And then I'd say the last one is, I did this before our chat, is getting out in the sun with, as little clothes as possible, but getting in vitamin D, right? And dropping into a meditation, right? 30, 40, an hour sometimes, just going inside on the land with the sun. And without going off to a big deep dive here, opening my channel. And so what I mean by that is, in the state of meditation, allowing myself to be the innate channel of love that I am, to either address a specific question or to just receive and allow anything that needs to come through.
Yeah, beautiful. And what impact does it have on your life, having these practices?
Mm. It allows me to connect into what we've been talking about today, whether it's the abundance, whether it's the love, or another word I would use that's very synonymous is fulfillment. And this has been a really big lesson for me recently. It's been building for a while, but it really just ticked over like last week, is that we spend a lot of time going outside, right? We've talked about it a lot today. We spend a lot of time looking for the expectation. I do something, I'll get it, and then I'll be good. But as we've discussed in many different ways today, that goodness is already here. That goodness or that fulfillment is the innate state of beingness of what we are. So all of those practices that I just outlined, whether it's the nap, whether it's the food, whether it's the meditation, whether it's the sun, it allows the space to remember that fulfillment has never gone anywhere.
That's beautiful. Thank you. This has been an amazing connected conversation. And of course, I want to have you back on because there's many different ways that we, little
I felt it, my friend. Lot of little tangents we could go off on. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. But I've loved getting to know you today, and thank you for allowing me to feed my curiosity and open up my community to what you do. So to connect with Harrison, the details will be in the next slide, but also in the bio below. And if you have any questions or comments, please share away. And I just want to say thank you for being in the space today, Harrison, and thanks for sharing your beautiful time and energy with me. And thank you to everyone for listening and being part of our energy and feeding your own curiosity. So go and ripple that out into the world. Thank you for sharing your beautiful time, energy, and please remember to be yourself and feel good for being it. Mwah.
Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna with me, your host, Harrison. If you gained value or this episode hit your heart, please remember to share this out with a friend, a family member, or a lover. You can also leave your love over on Apple reviews and Spotify star feedback, and this helps me spread my frequency to more souls in need. Finally, if you want to connect with me deeper, want to reach out, interested in coaching, please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Harrison Meagher, spelled Meagher. Sending you so much love.